I'm delighted to say Sam Lee of The Athletic is with us to talk to us a little bit about what's going on at Manchester City. Sam, good morning to you. How are you doing?
Good morning. All well, thanks. All well. How are you guys?
I'm good, thanks. Talk to us a little bit about where Pep Guardiola is in the traditional Pep Guardiola cycle. Are we looking at an extended stay at Manchester City, or does this feel like we're on the same kind of timeline as we had at Barcelona and at Bayern Munich?
I wouldn't say extended stay. I know he said the other day he's open to it, but what else are you going to say? You know, when you asked directly in the press conference, you're not going to say, no, I think I'll knock it on the head soon. You know, it's not doing himself any favours. But, I mean, I can see him seeing out his contract, which is still the end of next season. A lot of people, behind the scenes, a lot of, fans looking from the outside in seem to think he will leave at the end of the season. I can see what they mean. It does look like, the way the question was asked, it does look like he's irritable and getting a bit tired of things and all kinds of other factors. But I think he'll see out his contract. From what I've heard, he's planning for next season. City, I think City are going to give him the squad overhaul that he wanted towards the end of last season to keep things fresh enough for him to carry on.
Sam, we had you on about 12 months ago when I think you were asking Pep about some suggestion that there was a little bit of discontent between himself and Benjamin Mendy, and that there was perhaps signs underneath the surface of a very successful season that all wasn't perfect at Manchester City. Has that worsened as a result of what's gone on in the pitch, since they're not actually doing as well on the pitch as they were this time 12 months ago?
No, it's actually the other way around. It would be much easier to describe City's relative problems. They're relative because they're not mid-table. They're not going to get relegated. They're still going to finish in the top four, if not the top two, if not the top one. They are relative problems. They've just dropped a lot of points behind Liverpool, who obviously haven't dropped points in any game bar one. But no, it would be much easier to understand if there was some kind of Tottenham-esque rumours of Christian Eriksen and Jan Vertonghen and affairs and punching each other in the dressing room and this kind of thing, because the fans could look at it and think, oh yeah, there's some unrest in the camp. But after the game at the weekend, it was kind of tasked to go and speak to as many people as possible, people close to as many players and the coaching staff as possible. And another colleague went away, and we all came back and we all found the same thing. Everything behind the scenes in terms of how the players are getting on with each other is fine. There's no big issues like that. There's no friction. It just seems to be a frustration that things have kind of snowballed. The injuries. They're not very happy with VAR, which is a very, kind of them against us kind of mentality, but that's how it is. The same thing with the Bernardo Silva racism tweet, the whole controversy around that, which again is a very them versus us kind of thing. And the results haven't gone well. Everything's kind of snowballed from there. And, there's thinking about the Burnley game tonight, how would they mix it up too much? People want Fernandinho to go back into midfield. That's about it. The only other way you could probably freshen up the lineup is bring in Foden. If you were to make any other changes, there wouldn't be a dramatic impact. The injuries have taken their toll to an extent. They haven't got a lot at the moment, but they have at certain points. There's not a lot they can do within that squad. Obviously, they've spent a lot of money, but the fact remains there isn't a lot they can do within that squad to freshen it up dramatically.
Look, they spent a lot of money, Sam, but there still is a personnel question, and the person that you would have to question is Vincent Kompany. Now, granted, he doesn't come with the sort of... He comes with the aura that you can't necessarily just go out and buy. That comes with time, that comes with experience. But still, there are failings here and there. You mentioned in your piece yesterday in The Athletic that Luka Jovic was a potential opportunity to sign for Manchester City as well, and they couldn't make that acquisition happen. Whereas I was under the impression, say, with the Rodri signing, that there was years and years of preparation gone into a signing like that perhaps they can't actually fail in the transfer window with the amount of money and kind of intelligence they have. So why has this happened? Why have they got into a position where they're kind of looking at a few positions and thinking to themselves, we could have recruited better there?
I'm not entirely sure. I think the problem with the number 9, obviously Luka Jovic was one of them. I think the logic behind it was they wanted close to 100 million for Gabriel Jesus, which was never. I mean, that was never going to happen. Or at least they wanted a big figure, but they also wanted to bring in somebody who's better than Jesus. They couldn't find anybody in the end. They were looking at Ben Chilwell closely, and then until the end of April, it was pretty much on. And then I think they got in contact with him to say, this isn't going ahead anymore, because I think they realised that Benjamin Mendy couldn't be sold. The plan was to get rid of Mendy, but nobody would buy him at that point. Obviously, they wanted Harry Maguire, but then you talk about, in terms of the money they've got and the intelligence. But part of that intelligence, I suppose, is they don't want to be held to ransom. clubs have always come to them and said, you've got loads of money, we want to sell this guy. What do you reckon? They've wanted to change that. They don't see that as a sustainable way to run a business. And there's all the FFP questions or whatever, but they don't see that as a sustainable way to run a business, getting ripped off for transfers. So if they've got an idea of value, rightly or wrongly, and with Maguire, they wouldn't go to the 80, 85 million. So there's all kinds of different factors. But they wanted a left back, a striker, obviously a centre back. Different reasons didn't happen. Maybe they felt emboldened by the fact they've not had a left back for a couple of years. Delph's done fine, Zinchenko's done fine, and they maybe thought, we can stretch to going in without a new centre back. But obviously, with Laporte going down, that's pretty much a worst case scenario.
Can I ask now, in retrospect, though, do they feel like they dodged a bullet with Harry Maguire? Because Maguire's performances for Manchester United have been adequate. They have not been the dominant centre-back that you would expect for an 85 million. They haven't been Virgil van Dijk level, which is clearly what Manchester City need. Yeah,
the thing is, it's funny because a lot of these players, if not all of them, the players that City want to buy or go close to buying but don't actually get, everyone turns out to be a bullet dodged. Now, is that because they've got lucky, or these players they're not benefiting from the coaching they would get elsewhere? I know a lot of City fans had reservations about having Harry Maguire in the team. I think even on the Amazon documentary, there was a bit where Guardiola said, when they played Leicester, getting behind Maguire because, he's not fast.
Yeah.
But I just think if he'd have signed for City, I think he would have been part of a system. And look, the system hasn't always worked this season. But if he were to come in instead of Laporte, they wouldn't have had to move around things. I think Fernandinho could have probably stayed in midfield. That would have helped solidify things a bit more. I don't think it's a bullet dodge. I think if he would have come into a City team that knows exactly what it's doing, could play to his strengths, maybe mask his weaknesses a bit, I think it'd be a lot better. The problem is you've got a whole can of worms then when you go and talk about United. Fred's looked bad as well. Obviously, Alexis Sanchez might have had a short shelf life, but I think if he'd have gone to City and he'd have been, put into a system that's working for him, I think these players would have looked a lot better. It was the same kind of thing with Jorginho last year. Now with Lampard, even though Sarri was there before, but now with Lampard and everyone else is starting to kick on a bit more, we're seeing how good a player Jorginho is. So I think it's a coaching thing, to be honest. I think if he had signed for City, he'd have done well. And I've seen signs in Maguire. The way he brings the ball out of defence, it's been quite rare at United, but maybe that's just not what they want. I think at City, it would have suited him much better. Yeah. He probably should have known that, to be fair.
Yeah, OK. Let's talk a little bit about the managerial situation. And the backroom team has obviously come in for a bit of speculation just recently with the Arsenal job coming up again. Mikel Arteta had, as far as I know, basically shaken hands on getting the Arsenal job, was certainly on the verge of getting it. The phone stopped ringing over the course of the weekend, and next thing, Unai Emery is parachuted in and gets that gig. So is Arteta likely to go back to a club that has so publicly rejected him as recently as they have, or is he going to sit there at Manchester City and stay and see that Guardiola has a time frame and that clock is ticking?
Yeah, well, that's the big question, I think, because regardless, because I think he was affected by not getting that job. How couldn't you be not getting the Arsenal job? But the other side of it is, I still think the Arsenal job's quite good. I think they've got an attractive squad there. I think it's probably better, for argument's sake, than going into Manchester United. I still think Arsenal would be an attractive job. I think they could still finish a good season with the right manager. But the question is, does he stick around for 6 months, maybe 18 months, probably 18 months, and wait for Guardiola? Because I think the goal from City is to hire from within. If you're hiring from within, there's only going to be one candidate. I know Giovanni van Bronckhorst is around, but I don't know. I think Arteta would be. He's the one that's been on the ground coaching around City for longer. That's more of an internal appointment. I think that would appeal to him more. I'm not sure what the latest is, but as of Friday, people around him were saying he hadn't had an approach. Arsenal hadn't approached City, and Arteta hadn't said anything about it. I think you would imagine there'd be some kind of conversation, but they've got so many names on this list, and my colleague David Ornstein was saying they want people who are out of work. Nobody they have to pay a kind of severance package to. They want to kind of do it on the cheap. So yeah, I know what you mean. The original question, he's got rejected. I don't think he'll go. Basically, I don't think he'll go. Whatever the reasons are, I don't think he'll leave.
And what was your that's obviously changed, so Sam. It was a situation where, as Jerry mentioned, he was all set to go. Is it a situation now where he's more ingrained with Pep Guardiola ever since say that since Emery has been appointed Arsenal manager and subsequently sacked, there has been more positive sounds about Mikel Arteta coming out from Pep Guardiola himself, that we are seeing the grooming of Pep Guardiola 2.0 almost at Manchester City.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not sure if he's kind of, oh yeah, I love Pep even more, I'm going to stay. I think it's there. He is loyal to Pep. That's what's been put to me. I wrote a piece about Arteta after the Everton game in September. He's loyal to Pep. I think he could have gone to Newcastle in the summer. I think he gave a lot of thought to going to Newcastle. He is very keen to go and be a manager, and obviously, like I said, the Arsenal job is an attractive proposition. I just think the biggest factor now is when he was talking to Arsenal before, Guardiola had just won the first title. He just signed a new contract. I doubt Arteta would have been thinking, I can replace this guy. Now we're another 18 months down the line, and already people are saying, is Pep going to leave? Basically, he's got the 18 months, which is a long time in football, but it's effectively just another season. If he focuses on finishing this season and gets through the next, if you break it down like that, he's thinking, I could probably get this job. And I think that's if he doesn't go to Arsenal, I think that'll be the biggest factor. The fact that now him getting the City job is in view, whereas 18 months ago, I think that was off the table.
You mentioned Van Bronckhorst. What's his role in all this, and where did he become a character within the City hierarchy?
Well, Van Bronckhorst a few months ago, he started being around the club. The thing is, City's got quite a unique structure, where they own other clubs, and there's the whole business side of it, and there's a coaching structure that, to an extent, works across the different clubs. There's consultations. The last couple of weeks, the staff, a load of staff from Torquay, the Uruguayan club, they've been at the Etihad. So they try and share knowledge in that way. And I think the way it's been described is Van Bronckhorst wanted to come in and see how that all works, get some experience coaching. Initially, he didn't have an awful lot to do with the City first team. He's been around a lot, but he's also been to Melbourne. He was at New York towards the end of the MLS season. The playoff starting. He was around then. I think there was some idea that he was going to go to New York. I think that seems to have fizzled out. Go to New York as coach. That seems to have fizzled out, and you wonder maybe he wouldn't go now, because if Guardiola were to leave at the end of the season, then you can't bring back the replacement from New York within just as the season's starting. But yeah, he's there getting coaching experience. But now he's back in Manchester. He's a bit more involved in it, and just the idea from hiring from within. They might as well admit they're going to appoint Arteta. It's just interesting that this guy who's had success in his own coaching career is now part of the City football group to some extent. Maybe he would be a candidate, and maybe they would still want some interview process, but they want someone they're familiar with, which probably goes back all the way to getting Patrick Vieira in a few years ago. Yeah. I can't imagine he's going to be a candidate, but someone they're familiar with, and he is now one of those.
They're almost building a little empire of coaches in the Manchester City group, and it is interesting as well, kind of on a point that's not really connected to this, but just seeing the huge investment in the City group coming out last week. And you mentioned the CAS investigation as well into Manchester City over financial fair play rules. I think the last we've seen of that story is perhaps maybe just under a month ago at this point, where their appeal for Manchester City was thrown out, and we expect a hearing on that in some time. Is there concerns at Manchester City at the Etihad about how this might go?
No, I actually did the story. It was the day before. It was the day before the CAS hearing came out. But the thing with CAS rejecting City's case then was City said, well, hold on, the UEFA adjudicatory committee, or the investigative committee, are not fit to recommend this punishment to us. They wanted to get it thrown out as soon as possible. But our story was, speaking to sources within City, speaking to sources within UEFA, it looks like City aren't going to get a ban from the Champions League. They're certainly not worried about it. I mean, one possibility is they would get a ban, but then they would appeal, and UEFA would kind of softball the appeal. City would then win the appeal. Everyone would look happy then, because UEFA could say, "Wow, we tried. It came down to the court," and City could be like, "Wow, we've got justice and all this." But yeah, certainly the feeling, which it has been around the club the whole time, to be fair, but I was never sure whether that was defiance or not. But the feeling now is they are going to not get a Champions League ban. So no, I wouldn't say they were particularly worried about it at all. There should be a final decision this month.
So last question then, what has gone wrong on the pitch recently?
Okay, so as far as we know, there's no big bust up, which there normally is with these kind of things. I think it's just, unfortunately, for media purposes, it's quite a boring list of normal footballing reasons. The injuries they had, particularly at the start, when Laporte got injured, because then De Bruyne got injured straight away as well. Sane was injured, and it just looked like it was spiraling a bit. But then, so there's been that. Like I said, they can't refresh the squad, so the players are a bit tired. They're not quite in form. Bernardo Silva was given a long holiday from the end of last season because obviously he did so much for City and for Portugal. Came back, not out of shape, but yeah, maybe a bit out of shape. Not quite ready to go at his peak. Then the tweet thing kicked over, so he's had a poor season. De Bruyne, Jesus, and Walker, who have been named by people around as people who haven't, they haven't quite reached their best level. They're kind of inconsistent, which, especially in De Bruyne's case, you don't need that. So they're playing against deep defences. They're trying to break them down, but they've got injuries taking its toll on the squad. The players who are playing every week. Sterling, De Bruyne, maybe a bit tired. Maybe last season's catching up with them to some extent. There's just not quite the energy there. That's all snowballed with the results into like a kind of frustration around the squad. The mood's not great. Apparently, the Bernardo Silva tweet situation has affected the dressing room as well. And it's just a little combination of factors which doesn't add up to an awful lot because, like I say, they're probably still going to finish in the top 2 or 3, if not come back and win the league when everyone's fit. But because Liverpool's level is quite so high, City just aren't quite there, and there's a small lowering of standards, basically. But also, yeah, like you mentioned, Kompany's left. Fabian Delph was a big leader. He would keep people on their toes. Not necessarily a great leader on the pitch, but Kompany never played that often. But it's just being around, keeping people on their toes. Those two have gone. De Bruyne and Walker have been trying to rally the troops instead, not quite to the same effect, and just a load of little things like that have just contributed to a little problem which could potentially be quite costly because it looks like they're not going to win the league.
Sam, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Thanks, guys.
Sam Lee from The Athletic there giving us some thoughts on the situation at Manchester City.